Okay, so this is just, I'm trying to use the Instagram video live. I've never done this before. I'm going to speak English, obviously. My intention here is, he's telling me something, c'est presque prêt. Okay, so I was just saying now this is an experience. I've never done lives on Instagram, and I'm just making the experience. So anyway, it's in English, and I'm going to open the door to my cat. And my intention here is to see if I'm able to do this first, of course, and then also to train in English, because I think time has come that I can share my experience with Dharma. Dharma is the mind training that helps human beings to transform our problems, that we could slowly maybe change our relationship to suffering and learn how it's possible to produce less of suffering if we are finding that interesting and probably maybe beneficial, and how in the Buddha Dharma methodologic you can find so many tools that are very serious. They are meant to be taken seriously somehow, even if it is with a heart, a light presence and a light heart and the lightness of youth in our mind, but in the same time it's very efficient on the long run. And this is why I waited to be over 60 years old to share this experience. I have only shared all of these experiences by dancing and by pointing out into the dance how we can look at our mind while we are dancing, which is absolutely incredibly deep and very beautiful. And it's also very rich, because as we are dancing we can experience many ways of looking at our own mind. But looking at our own mind is essential to understand how is it that we are relating with emotions, and how is it that we are relating also with the emotion of other people. So I wanted to test this Instagram tool today to see if I'm able to do this, to see if I'm able to speak in English, which is not something I'm doing so many times. And also I see there's people joining in here. Yes, there's Isabel. Hello, Isabel. And somebody else, I cannot see the names, but I will get better with time. Thank you. Anyway, it's nice people joining in. And yes, so in order to share my experience with the Buddha Dharma, and I waited 40 years to do this, when I was a model, so I'm going to tell you a little bit my story for whoever doesn't know that, specifically in English, because in English I have never really published that much. Even when I was a model, and I became famous at one point when I was 19 years old in Paris, because I did this advertisement which is called, they call it usually Miriam, actually, my name. I never really accepted to do these things that they like. At that time already they liked it, no? They wanted you to pose in meditation or to pose in the yoga posture, and I always said I will never do that, because this is not something that I'm doing to show off about my practice. It's something that I really need to be secret about. So now I'm not revealing all my secrets, but I'm thinking maybe it's time I can open a little bit my experience by the speech and by talking and by conversation. And so the first thing I do now is, in this little experience on Instagram, is to tell you a little bit my story, very briefly. So I was born in France from a family that is Hungarian mostly and part French. And I left for United States when I was only a baby. And so my first language was actually English. But then when I came back to France later, French became mainly the language everybody was speaking around me, so I switched. And then I became a dancer very young. When I was 12 years old, I was a professional dancer. And slowly, I discovered I think I started to understand that when I was like 13, 14 years old, that dance was related to something inside of my own being, that it opened the door to me when I was dancing, that suddenly I would find something that was natural inside of me that was completely wonderful. So it's not only my willing to make something beautiful with the dance, because I really appreciate art and I appreciate also the working on art. But the main purpose for me was really to understand what was that window that was opening when I would dance, because all around me people were suffering so much and having so much problems, divorces and also lots of people complaining or not being happy about life. And on another hand, my family was not rich, but it was we could eat, and we could have a roof. And so it was never the suffering of lacking the essential for living. It was more lacking the essential for love, I would call it more. So when I was 14, 15 years old, I left home. I left home school. I left everything. I was actually living in the streets with the people who do that. And I discovered in the same time a book of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche that is called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and that really blowed my mind in the sense of being exactly what I was feeling. And I immediately understood it was related with why I was dancing. Then later I became a model, as I told you before, and when I was a model, I actually just by chance was a model for an important advertisement that became very famous and still is famous in France. And that opened to me some kind of opportunity for fame or for works or for promotions. And I kind of felt that at that moment of my life, I was then 19, it was more appropriate for me to retire in a retreat. So instead of doing all of that, I went into full retreat. And I did what is called in Buddhist Tibetan Buddhism, it's called Nyundo. Nyundo means like the things you do before you go on your traveling. So actually, in this case, Nyundo is interesting because it's lots of things. It's 100,000 of many things, 100,000 frustrations and 100,000 different practices, which are nowadays, 40 years later, I find all of this absolutely so wonderful and so marvelous. And sometimes I'm a little bit sad that lots of people don't enhance how much this kind of going through, doing a lot of times that thing, which is, for example, frustration, or, for example, wishing the well-being of all beings, and meditating on what does that mean for me to wish the well-beings of all beings. And it was so incredibly marvelous and so much different from everything I have ever seen before that moment. It was really incredible. I got 20 years old in that retreat, and I was alone in the forest and repeating, may all beings be happy, may they be free from the causes of suffering. I was repeating this, and may they find this joy, and may they establish themselves in equanimity. Later I will talk about details about these things. This is what I mean to share my experience. But here, like, given a full overview of this, it was incredible to suddenly, after month and month of doing that, 100,000 takes time, I suddenly felt it from within. It was not anymore superficial. And, well, 100,000 is just a number, but actually it's not a bad number. And so then later I came across the need very much later to work in the world and to earn money. So I did some producing of festivals, mainly in Portugal, and then I did also the dance. And I created the Dança Duende network, which is nowadays completely held by people who studied with me and are incredibly wonderful and mastering most of this work and working together. And then I wrote also a book about the history of my life, which is not in English yet, and another book which is a romance, which I will talk about, and it will be translated hopefully by myself into English. So this is just a little experience today. I'm going to leave it here. I just wanted to enhance how much the practice of finding, at least if you're not a Buddhist, but at least something that does give you in the same time a structure and in the same time the freedom of having your mind not stuck into concepts and not stuck into habitual tendencies. If that is possible, it's worth it. It's really worth it. And of course, if you can practice art and dance, it goes along very well with your spiritual practice. And the spiritual practice is not about religion. It's not about established organizations. It's more about your loneliness and how your loneliness gives you the opportunity to open to the fact that we are not separated at all. But we can undress all these things to reach the ornament of nakedness, which is the word I heard in my sleep this morning, the ornament of nakedness. It is possible. Nakedness is not a brand. It's not something we do to please people, and it's secret. But the nakedness is how much inside of our own heart there is something that is extremely vast and extremely simple and extremely good and extremely wonderful, and it's even delicious, and it's just there, it's just there. And instead of being so much problematic one with another, so much problematic about satisfaction and how much not satisfaction is practiced and how much never it is enough about anything, instead of that, you find that actually we do have a wonderful, wonderful, accessible nature inside of ourselves, and that's where we do need communication, we do need help, and we do need to help each other, and we do need to find the ways to realize that. And no matter how much there is problems in the world, you can always be able to touch that richness, that treasure. It's available, and it's not for sale. It's not in a supermarket. It's just for oneself to dig and to travel, and the adventure of that. Thank you very much, and I hope I was able to do this. I don't know. I don't even know how to stop it now. What can I do? I don't know. How do I stop it?